Welcome to the Believe the Hope podcast, where inspiration meets reality. Join us as we delve into stories of resilience, triumph, and the relentless pursuit of hope. Whether you're seeking encouragement or simply a reminder of the power within us all, this podcast is your guide. From personal journeys to expert insights, we explore what it means to believe in hope against all odds. Get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and empowered. This is Believe the Hope.
I think the simplest answer is you just have to do it literally one person at a time, one interaction at a time. I mean, there's certain people in this world, don't get me wrong, that can take on large scale global issues and get themselves in a position where they can actually make a meaningful change, right? But most of us, 99.9% of us, can't do that. So why are we worried about it? Like, sure, these world events are important, right? But how much can I worry about that and physically change it versus when I leave, not even start with leaving the door. When I wake up in the morning and my wife comes downstairs, how can I react with her? When the kids wake up, how can I react with them? When I get to work, how can I react with my staff? And then of course, when my patients get here, how can I react with them?
Hello and welcome to the episode of the Believe the Hope podcast. I am your host, Paul Nottoli, and I am here with Dr. Carl Nottoli. So if you're paying attention, yes, this is my brother. And if you're watching on the other side, if you watch our podcast episodes, this physical specimen is actually my younger brother across from me. So yes, I don't know if you can see that we may be brother. I think people say our eyes or our nose is kind of
Eyes in the
eyes in the
nose,
nose.
yeah.
They say that we can talk, we're together. So has been trained in one of the most successful and specific ways of treating patients with integrative diagnosis. He's treated thousands who have overcome long-term injuries and pain. His passion is to ensure that each patient gets exactly what they need. His clinical practice exists to break the cycle of the patient becoming commodity in a revolving door of healthcare. He discovers the root cause of your chronic pain, then identifies the best treatment to improve your function and eliminate your pain. The most enjoyable part of his profession is seeing the glimmer of hope when someone's problem is truly identified, then getting to see the hope turn to joy when their pain is gradually resolved. So thank you for being on. And because he's humble and modest, he's also a world master jiu-jitsu champion. So I think that's pretty cool that he still has that in him. I do not have that in me anymore. I don't even run anymore, but yeah, he's still got
I
that.
think our ears used to look the same too until I started jiu-jitsu, and then
Yes, I don't have the cauliflower ear, but you're starting to get that with jiu-jitsu.
yeah.
Yeah, so my first question I ask everybody, because it's everyone has different perspectives, and what does hope mean to them personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been listening to a lot of your other guests, and they have such great answers and different backgrounds. And I think it starts as an attitude first, or a belief. You have to believe before you have evidence sometimes. And I think hope is one of those things that starts that way. And then eventually it should, in my experience, it should evolve into action. It should evolve into a character trait. You should view yourself as a hopeful person, and that should be a part of your character. And I think that can drive you forward in a lot of instances, because obviously life is full of ups and downs. It goes from that initial, like, well, I hope things work out. But if you don't first have faith, you don't first have the belief that it's possible, and then you don't start acting on that, like being positive. A positive mindset's kind of similar. If you can be positive instead of negative, you can overcome a lot. And you can start to transform your life and transform your actions. And I see hope as a similar thing. Again, it starts as just a belief, and then it starts as an attitude. All right, I'm gonna get some actions done to lean into that a little bit more and to make something happen. And then if you do that enough times, that becomes part of your character.
Mm-hmm.
You walk around and say, I am a hopeful person. It becomes a part of you rather than just, yeah, I hope things work out. I
Mhm.
hope this and I hope that and I hope the Bears win, but they won't.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Because you have to have, that's another thing.
yeah.
Is like you have to be able to have tangible control over it as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to your intention and thoughts and, um, what you tell yourself reflects some of the actions that you take, or who you surround
Hmm.
yourself with. Because if you're constantly just in the cycle of, some one of the guests that's coming up, he said hope is not a strategy, and just in general, because you have to have that, but in turn becomes an attitude or a way of life. Yeah, you don't take action, you don't have those wins, you don't have those, outcomes when we need to pull yourself out of something, a bad situation or just a not ideal situation.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And
Go
it
ahead.
just a real silly example, talking about jujitsu. I had been doing a lot of competitions this year, basically from February to August. I was basically doing a pretty large scale tournament every month. And a lot of it involved travel and, uh, sleeping in hotels and eating crappy food, and like training my butt off. But it was all geared towards, at first it started as I want to win this one. And then I signed up for the next one. Okay, I want to do a little bit better, win my division and then win the open class, which is if you can medal in your division, then you can enter the open class and it's all weight classes, same skill level and age group, but all weight classes. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to win my division and win the open class. And then each tournament, you gain a little bit more confidence and you think, all right, well, there's this large world's tournament in Vegas at the end of August. Could I even sign up for this? Could I even do this? And each win, you're like, okay, I want to do this. And again, it kind of starts as hope. Like, I hope I can actually be able to sign up for this and not make myself look like an idiot.
Mhm.
And then as you keep training, you got to actually sign up for it to, get that fire. But
Yeah.
then you're like, okay, I hope I can medal. And you tell yourself that. And then you got to train your butt off and you're training all the time, even when you're tired and a little bit sore and maybe even a little bit injured.
Mhm.
But eventually, you just keep doing that, keep piling up wins. And then by the time you get there, you're like, you know, not only can I be on the podium, you start winning a couple matches. You're like, I'm going to win this whole thing.
Mhm.
But again, you're like back to your point of this whole podcast, that in a kind of simple example, I think it all starts as hope.
Mhm. Well,
Hmm.
last weekend or the weekend before, we were both home with dad, and we were just talking about football and stuff like that back in the back in the day, back when
Yeah.
we played, we were so much tougher. Back in the day, and I was thinking about how almost basically how I started my senior year and wasn't. I mean, I'm not big at all, and like the people are always like, I have no idea how you actually play that position. Robert tells me that all the time because he played the same position.
Yeah.
He's
Everyone thought you played
and
defensive
he's and
back.
he's and he's 6'3", he's 6'3", 200
Yeah.
pounds, and I was playing the same position at 5'10", 135 when I was in high school or whatever. And
Yeah.
I look back on it as one, it's that people believed in me, my teammates believed in me, my coaches believed in me, which gave me that, okay, I hope I can start my senior year and actually be on the
Hmm.
field. Two, I think there was almost like a naive, um, not in a bad way, but just I thought I belonged out there. I thought I'm the best. Like, you're coming at me, it doesn't matter. I'm here. I'm starting with this team. I can do it. But
Yeah.
then like I don't get blown on the hole. I make some tackles. I make some plays. Like, they run away from me. You know what I mean? They're running to the other side. They're not even running towards my side anymore. That gives you
Hmm.
confidence to say, yes, I do belong. And that's again
Hmm.
another silly example of that. But I mean, so even some naiveness of that hope, I think, can go a long way because it pushes you to have that confidence and to build that character. Um,
Yeah.
with that, and not naive and just like totally delusional naiveness, but just
Yeah.
almost like you don't know what you don't know type of naiveness. But
Yeah.
sometimes it can give you some confidence that you belong, and and you see this all the time, especially we played a lot of sport, but you see it all the time in athletics. A lot of young teens, that they're like, "Oh, I don't know how this team's doing it," and it's almost because
Yep.
they they're just young and they just are like, "I'm just doing my thing," and it turns in, and they
Hmm.
build a confidence and character. And you see these teams that you're like, I don't know how they won the championship, but they did because they had that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they had it all along.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off what you're saying, I think as long as you're putting in the requisite amount of work, it's okay to have that
Hmm.
naive hope
Hmm.
at first, because until the universe kicks you in the face enough times and
Yeah.
says you're not ready,
Yeah.
like, you just keep
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
right? And if you keep having successes, even if it's not 100% of the
Hmm.
time, if it's the majority of the time, you're on the right
Yeah.
track. And if you can withstand the losses and withstand the face beatings, then yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
Yep. I know we do, because we practice the same with the integrative diagnosis training, shockwave, and other
Mhm,
things. Um, we see a lot of people that don't have a lot of hope, um,
mhm.
with because they've been around the bush for a lot of different areas. Uh, when people are coming into your practice, how are you helping them find that hope again? Not just with results, but just with, giving them confidence again and giving them that hope back.
Yeah. Boy, it's tough sometimes. There's a because like you said, they've they've already had pain for years, sometimes decades.
Mhm.
They've already seen 3, 5, 10 different therapists, doctors, you name
Mhm.
it. Um, and some of those people still come in pretty positive. So those folks are a little less difficult, um, to kind of coach through initially,
Mhm.
because once you get your consultation and do your exam, as a provider with our skill sets, you kind of know with pretty good certainty how this thing's going to play out,
Mhm.
right? But that person still has to trust what you're saying, still has to be on board to show up to the appointments, to pay for it,
Mhm.
to do what you ask them to do at home in order to heal. So even if you have a good certainty that you can help heal them, with all those variables that we talked about, um, they still have to believe that,
Mhm.
because some people frankly don't. I've
Mhm.
had, this doesn't happen very often, maybe a few a year, where you have a clean exam, clean consultation, you can help them, and they walk out the door with the same expression and tone and belief system that they had when they walked in. It's like, well, you actually really don't want this right now then.
Mhm.
But they can't admit that to themselves.
Mhm.
But so those are the bookends.
Yeah.
People that are already pretty positive and hopeful, and then people that are just so, um, despondent that they either never will get help or they're not ready to accept help yet.
Mhm.
There's a large portion that you're talking about that's right in the middle that really needs that first bump. Um, and those are tough. And I think over the years, um, my mindset has gone less away from, let me show them how smart I am to get them on board,
Mhm.
to let me talk to them like a human being, that I can empathize and sympathize with them, because either I've lived it or I've had a lot of patients live it, and maybe share some success stories briefly if it seems like they are into that, or they ask about it. And let me just show them that we're on the same page, that I understand where they're coming from, before I start talking about, yep, I've seen this 100 times. It's likely X, Y, and Z
Mhm.
diagnosis. We'll do the exam. Because some people, they like that nuts and bolts, but most people, they're going to connect on that emotional front first.
Mhm.
So, you kind of have to get that buy-in that, yeah, we're on the same page. It's time to have that little sliver of hope. It's time to have that little sliver of positivity, and just start taking steps.
Mhm.
So I think I answered your
Yeah.
question. I know it was
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
roundabout, but um, it's just such an interesting, take on how it works in clinical practice, because you just see all types.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, there's been a few episodes where they're like, hope, the opposite of hope is despair or apathy, which I think that's where you get some of those
Yeah.
people.
Or even
Not,
nihilism.
yeah, just almost like it. Yeah, you have, well, so you have that extreme. You have the other people that are just, they're just already just very hopeful, positive people, and they just need someone
Yeah.
that they feel is confident, smart enough or confident enough to take on their case, and they're in. But
Yeah.
that, yeah, that definitely the middle ground is, I found people that have trusted me more because I was the first person that actually like asked them enough questions and actually listened to them. They had been a lot of
Yeah.
providers that they're like, I think they meant well. They're like, they weren't mad about it, but they like, they just would, they just felt like they didn't listen. Every time I told them something, they
Yeah.
just were just like, oh, it just has to be this. And they went to the same thing that they had gone to, because that was what they were trained in, or that, et cetera. And sometimes just
Yeah.
listening and letting them give you um, the feedback, because I find that through this podcast and just different trainings with some life coaching is, when people tell you something, it's important to them why they're telling you that. And it's
Right.
especially as a job as a provider or some type of professional, you have to decipher, why are they telling me this? Why is this important? And is this relevant right at the moment that we can help them go forward? And with that,
Mhm.
I think that goes a long way, not only as a practitioner, but just a person in the world and life, because
Yeah.
you see people react on emotion now, not rational thinking a lot, and you see it all over social media as everybody reacts on emotion, versus, but most of the time is because they're not being heard, or they're not being, people want to hear what they want to respond to, not, they don't want to hear to understand something or somebody.
Mhm.
um so that's just a little bit of my take on that as well, but yeah, I totally agree that
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, feeling heard, because I think that's probably the number one, um, vocal complaint. If a patient is gonna express that during the consultation or during the exam, they're like, in so many words, sometimes they just flat out say
yeah.
it, like, "They didn't listen to me," but in so many words, that's kind of the vibe
Mhm.
we're getting as they're telling us their story is, "They just didn't fricking listen to me.
Mhm.
I was telling them this and this and this, and, they just didn't listen."
Mhm.
And I've told patients before, I'm like, "Look, you as a doctor, it's our job to listen to what you're telling me verbally, but also what your body's telling me.
Mhm.
And then from there, it's my job to have the requisite skill set to know what to do with that
Yeah,
information."
exactly.
And clearly, the other people didn't have that. Again, they meant well, but if you don't have that skill set, it's just, okay, I'm going to hear only what I want to hear and then plug that into whatever I do as a clinician, and that's it.
Mhm.
And if it works, great. If it doesn't, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for listeners or anybody listening, watching, listening, uh, that they would, how do they spread more hope in their community environment? How would you suggest people do that?
Yeah. I think the simplest answer is you just have to do it literally one person at a time, one interaction at a time. I mean, there's certain people in this world, don't get me wrong, that can take on large scale global issues and get themselves in a position where they can actually make a meaningful change, right?
Mhm.
But most of us, 99.9% of us, can't do that. So why are we worried about it? Like, sure, it's these world events are important, right? But how much can I worry about that and physically change it versus when I leave, not even don't even start with leaving the door. When I wake up in the morning and my wife comes downstairs, how can I react with her?
Mhm.
When the kids wake up, how can I react with them? When I get to work, how can I react with my staff? And then, of course, when my patients get here, how can I react with them?
Mhm.
Or how can I act rather than, sorry, react
Yeah,
is
I know what you
the
meant.
wrong
Yeah,
choice of words. I think you understand what
react.
I'm saying.
Yes.
Yes. How can I interact and act with them in a way that builds those relationships, that builds that trust, that builds that hope, that lets us think the world is not going to fall apart because X and Instagram and Facebook tell us it is.
Mhm.
Um, and the legacy media tells us it is. It's like, no, we're getting so worked up about stuff that, again, the vast majority of us absolutely have no business looking at other than to be somewhat informed.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it has to start at home. It has to start at work. It has to start, like for me at the jujitsu gym,
Mhm.
like all these little interactions when you go get coffee, when you go to the gas station, when you go to a restaurant, like how are you acting with the people around you? If you're an asshole to everybody, but you expect
Yeah.
everybody to be nice back to
Yeah.
you, uh, no, absolutely not.
Mhm.
Don't. Um, and some people don't even know they're doing it.
Mhm.
It's just it's unfortunate. But again, I think they're so wrapped up in their own head in their own little world, that they're on a mission to save the planet that they're not even seeing the obvious things in front of them.
Mhm.
Like, how could I be nice to this waitress? How could I be nice to the guy at the gas station? How can I be nice to my kids and my wife? And how can I help my patients, um, really focus on their health and focus on what matters? And I think that's how you start to really build that trust and how you really build hope in your community, because healthy people and happy people are going to transfer that energy onto other people. Miserable people
Mhm.
and unhappy people are going to transfer that energy onto everyone else.
Mhm.
Um, so it sounds cliche and it sounds silly, but I literally think it starts with every single interaction, of every single day.
Yeah, and you're not the only guest that has said this in a variety a version of that. We actually have a Mayor and I have a mentor and coach that he says it's the mirror philosophy is like whatever you're seeing or
Yeah.
whatever you're portraying is often is what's sent back to you, and um, in the little things of holding the door for somebody, saying hi, being kind to somebody because they may be having a bad day, they may be lacking hope, they may be in a portion of where they're going on into despair because of a variety of things in their life, and you said hi to them and held the door for them, or pay for their coffee, or whatever it is, you did that little thing, and that might make the difference to keep them to have them have more hope and build that character's mindset and to even take
Yeah.
action, what you talked about before. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been really trying myself to be more mindful of that. Is like, how am I from the time I get up to the time I go to bed? Like, how am I reacting on a regular basis
Yeah.
to be more
And it's
positive?
hard.
Or, and this podcast has helped that because I'm trying to get this message out there. And the same time, I'm doing these interviews. Is sometimes you hear as I'm doing the interviews, you hear exactly what you need to hear at that time. So I get
Yeah.
someone might not be getting anything out of the interviews, but I am because there's sometimes where, you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess I am doing that. I should probably change that." But by having these conversations, I this is my little way of giving that interaction to the world to spread more hope, to give somebody
Yeah.
um yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's great because, again, I think you said this on one of your other episodes, is like all the negativity gets to clicks,
Mhm.
especially in an election year.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to listen to the belief of hope and the positivity of
Yeah.
it's like everyone should,
Yeah.
but how many of those people are gonna listen to this versus, what the vice president debate or what Trump
Yeah.
or Kamala Harris
Yeah.
said?
Just everything in the hurricanes and are just there in a portion of despair because, I mean, if they need hope, that's all that I don't even ever want to live in or experience. I want to ever want to have
Oh, I
because
know,
it's just
I know.
everything. I mean, those people are feel bad for them because they're desperate. They're in a place of despair, and a lot of them are just trying to have a glimmer of hope to get something to eat for the day, get some clean
Yeah.
water, brush their teeth, things like that. Not even, yeah.
But I bet a lot of them would say something similar to this if you sat down and talked to them. It's like, "Look, you're not gonna have power for 6 months. We can't get you out of this location for a little bit, or we have to, it's gonna take a couple years to rebuild your
Hmm.
house. How are you keeping it all together?" They would probably say something similar, like, "Well, we're just trying to live one day and one moment at a
Hmm.
time. We're trying to be happy with fresh water. We're trying to be happy with a little bit of food. We're
Hmm.
trying to be happy if my kid has clean clothes today."
Hmm.
Because I mean, that would be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But given our circumstances right now where we live in Illinois, like we're very fortunate we don't have any natural
Hmm.
disasters right now, and it's still hard to live every day hopeful and
Yeah.
positive and have those positive interactions. You get a bad night of sleep, or your kid gets in trouble at school, or the dog chews up something in your house, like you want to just, or somebody cuts you off in
Hmm.
traffic, or almost runs into you, or actually does fender bender you, or you just want to lash out.
Hmm.
And I'm just as guilty of this as everyone else,
Hmm.
right? But if we can quickly turn that into something different, I think that's where the real magic will start to happen.
You touched on this a little bit with our previous conversation earlier. How does one maintain hope for the future and a better outcome, but also have the realistic expectations with where they're at the moment?
Yeah, this one's tough for me because I'm I don't know what you would label it psychologically, but I'm very hard on myself.
Me too. Go figure.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know if I'm super qualified to answer this
Okay.
because I struggle with it every day.
Okay.
But I try to remember, look, if you look back at least far enough, like especially if I'm having, just a rough day or a rough week or whatever it is, where did I come from 6 months ago, a year ago, 6 years ago? Am I doing better now than I was then? And if I can honestly say yes to that, then all right,
Yeah.
we're at least on the right track.
Yeah.
If I can't, then I have to really look in the mirror and do some inventory and figure out, what's going on. But your question was
No, I
how to
think that
maintain.
answer yeah, I think that answers it. It's
Yeah,
maintaining the belief of hope to that there's something better and brighter for you, but also having the expectation that that the situation that you're in and the steps you have to take to move into that hope,
yeah, yeah.
maintaining that realism
Yeah,
versus the like we
yeah,
talked a little bit about the naiveness of the hope being totally delusional. And like you said, well, yeah, I hope this gets better, but then you just are like, you go about your day,
they don't do
you
anything.
don't do anything. Yeah, you just go about your day. So I know we touched on it a little bit, but I mean, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I am very hard on myself too. Erin always just tells me, she's like, yeah, you're harder on yourself than anybody else is like on you. Your
Yeah.
expectations
I
are
think
high.
our expectations for ourselves is up here, and
Yeah.
everyone else's expectations for us are
Yeah.
here. And that that delta's where we struggle.
Yes. Very much so.
But again, I think, every once in a while, if we can look back and say, are we on the right track?
Yeah.
Then I think that's how you can maintain some parity in the whole situation. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you're kind of wired like us, maybe you have to do it more often.
Hmm.
Maybe I should just do it more often to try to keep myself out of those loops of like, what the hell are you doing? Are you doing enough?
Hmm.
Did you do, did you do this today? Did you do that today? Did you do that last week? Can you do more?
Hmm.
'Cause sometimes I just need to chill
Yeah.
out
Yeah. Sometimes it's,
and take it
yeah.
easy, you know?
Sometimes rest is actually the answer to rest
Yeah.
and just chill and turn your brain off
Yeah.
for a little bit is actually the answer, not pushing harder.
Yeah. Because I mean, there's honestly been times if I take a nap or I get a good night's sleep or I just chill out and watch a silly movie with Shannon, and then, like, all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, I feel great.
Mhm.
The world's fine."
Mhm.
But a moment ago, I was, like, just boiling
Mhm.
about nothing, like, I
Yeah.
can't even pinpoint it. And I think that's one of the reasons I like jujitsu so much is because I'm just naturally like that. If I don't have an outlet, I can just start to boil for no reason.
Mhm.
I've always kind of been wired this way. Um, so it's just that's just a good outlet for me physically.
Mhm. Is there anything that other insights that you personally wanna add that we didn't discuss or talk about? A message you would like to share?
I think I'd just reiterate some of the things we talked about because it's what I reiterate to myself to try to maintain some sanity in a world that seems to be crazy. Um, is staying positive, building hope as a belief first. If it's something new, something scary, as a belief first, and then as action as an attitude, and then gradually as character. Um, in just the small interactions we have every day with people. Because
Mhm.
again, to me, that's what really moves the needle.
Mhm.
You know, when people talk about changing the community and changing their world, I don't think they fully grasp how important it is to literally start in your own home, and then as soon as you leave your door, and then as soon, all the way up until when you go to bed. It's just such an important thing that I think we all tend to overlook and over index, when in fact that's the thing that matters the
Mhm.
most.
Yeah. I think of it as the way where, when a stadium's sometimes, they have, like, the Super Bowl half times, they turn off all the lights, and then someone lights a phone, and then there goes a phone, and then you see, like, the light, like, light up the entire and then eventually the entire stadium's lit up, and then all of a sudden there's, like, a stage and a concert, and I think that's the way
Yeah,
hopefully this podcast eventually does. It's just
yeah,
one light, one light, one light, and that maybe it's only this section that has more light than the darkness or the craziness. Um, but that's the best analogy I can think of. It's just this one light, one light, one light, one light, one light, and then
yep,
eventually, by everyone doing that, everyone listening, everyone helping their community or their homes and bringing that positivity, it is contagious. Eventually light will bring out dark, will overcome darkness no matter what situation that it's in. um
hmm
but yeah, I think we just need to do a small part. And
and I think that's how it changes generationally too,
yes.
right? I mean, if your kids see that every day,
Mhm.
whether it's the positive side or the negative side, chances are they're going to lean into that
Mhm.
and do that. Obviously, there's always a few outliers that buck the system, but
Mhm.
again, those are the exceptions. That's not the
Yeah.
rule. The rule is everyone that you interact with is likely going to translate that energy onto somebody
Yeah.
else. I think it's honestly only the few very strong-willed that like just don't ever let it.
Yeah.
They're like
Yeah.
Teflon.
It just slides off of them.
There's just certain people you cannot
Yeah.
affect. They're just always in such a positive mood or have their shit
Mhm.
together or whatever it is. But I think the vast majority of us feed off of energy. And again, whatever you're going to expose yourself to, be careful with that
Mhm.
and be very careful with that. I used to think that was a silly idea, but
Mhm.
I no longer believe that.
Yeah.
I'm 41 now. I have 3 kids. Like when I was in my 20s, I'm in teens. I was like, it's
Yeah.
crap. You're strong enough to see whatever, listen whatever, and be
Mhm.
fine. I no longer believe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you, learn more about your practice, work with you, or just um, see how really good you are at jujitsu?
Um, well, I'm not that good, so we don't need to worry about that. The
I mean, you're good enough to win a large tournament in Vegas. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, as a blue belt,
Oh,
let's put it in
okay, all right.
context.
It's all right.
I'm gonna try to go back every year and win, but yeah, no, don't get me wrong. It was a lot of hard work and it was very rewarding and very fun, and I'm very proud of myself. But um, that's the cool thing about jujitsu. It's just never ending journey.
Mhm.
As soon as you succeed in one thing, you start over at the next level, and you got to work your way back
Yeah.
up. So, but my clinic is located in Libertyville, Illinois, which is like north suburbs of Chicago. Um, we are on social media. I tend to rarely post, but if you DM us or send a message, or I think all our contact info is on our
Mhm.
bios for Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Um, Instagram is functional underscore pain underscore relief. Facebook is functional pain relief, and YouTube is functional pain relief. And our website is functionalpainrelief.com. So there's lots of ways you can contact us. Again, even if we're not actively posting,
Mhm.
we do respond to messages, phone calls, emails, the like.
Yeah, and I will obviously you're my brother, but I will also say that as a practitioner, I've learned a lot from you and my skill set, and um, you and Dr. Brady have helped a lot over the years, and I don't think there's anybody I mean, I'm in Illinois too, but there's no one as skilled as you are in the state of Illinois at what you do. I'm trying to be as skilled as
Appreciate
you. I'm working hard at it. I do on a regular basis. But
it.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, your skill set and your knowledge of how to read the body and understand the body, or not just what people are saying, but also how it reacts. That's one thing I've always tried to get better on, and one skill that I try to get better on is not so much people telling you the things and figuring out what that is, but what's the body telling you? How are they moving? And I feel like
Mhm.
um you and Dr. Brady just have like, I call it the savant like when it comes to that stuff. It's like this weird, I don't know, you guys just pick up on it really quickly, and it's always nice to train with you and learn a lot from you guys because it does. I'm like, "Oh, I never even thought of to look at that." Or I never even thought
Yeah.
that that was like a big clue based on how the tissue was responding or how the person was moving. Um, so
Yeah.
I will endorse you 100%. So if you're even anywhere within an
Appreciate it.
hour um, yeah, of Carl, yeah, I would, and you got some type of pain or injury, you need to invest time and effort to get there, and I will continue to
We even have patients that will fly in,
yeah,
to see us,
yeah,
so,
and I will
you know.
continue to train with him, so if you're coming to my clinic at any point in time, you are getting
Oh, yeah. You're in great hands if you're seeing Dr. Paul, that's for sure.
yeah,
And it's interesting, just to put a fine point on what you said, because, how you first learn is listening to what the patient's telling you, interpreting that,
mhm,
right? Because pain and different qualities of pain and different locations of pain can mean different things. And then it's doing the physical exam and watching their body move or putting them through
mhm,
ranges of motion and seeing what moves and what doesn't. So those two skill sets alone are very, very complex and complicated. And most physicians are absolutely terrible at those two
mhm,
things.
or they overlook them. They don't think they're as important as they are.
Yes,
Mhm,
absolutely. That's a good
mhm,
point. And then there's another two tiers to those first two things that we discussed, what they're telling you and what their body uh, can physically tell you by moving it. And the other two basically are what are what's the gray? What's really being said here?
mhm,
Because they may tell you something and show you something by moving, but it means something than what they're different than what they're telling
yeah,
you. And they're just doing their best to interpret
yep,
it, but it can change clinically. Like you said, that's sometimes the things that Dr. Brady and I will pick up.
mhm,
Like, oh, it's actually this and not the
yeah,
thing that they're telling you
yeah,
because of the presentation.
mhm,
So there's that gray area that you get better at with time, just just doing the
yeah,
work, right? And paying attention.
yeah,
And then the last thing, which is probably just as hard, is being able to feel their body, their tissue, and what that's telling you,
mhm,
right? Because that can even tell you just as much or more than what they're physically telling you with their mouth and what their body will move like and tell you. You can get that gray area that I was talking about of how to interpret those two things. And then finally, feeling their tissue and what does that finally
mhm,
say? And those four things, I mean, that in a nutshell is what we've been learning since we graduated.
mhm,
And that's why it's so difficult. Not a lot of providers will do what we do because that is so much harder than learning a technical skill.
yes,
Everyone just wants to learn the technical skill. It's like, okay, that's cool. You can help a lot of people with that. But if you don't know all these other things, you are doing yourself and your patients a vast disservice.
mhm,
And if that's your choice, that's your choice. But that's how I believe and that's how I practice.
mhm,
So that's how I've always carried myself as a physician, as an integrated diagnosis provider, is that I always want to be getting better at those other four things. The technical aspect is the cherry on top. That's to me at this point in my career, that's the easy part.
mhm,
Yeah, it takes years and years and years and thousands of hours to get good at, to get really good at. but those other things you can continue to hone over your career and still pull gems out of.
Hmm.
Uh, but again, that's what separates me and you from a lot of other people.
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't know what else to say about
Yeah.
that. I think that's it.
Yeah, so if we got a little bit of tangent of that, we say that because this is a podcast about hope, but that's exactly those types of things and that type of detail is what we're thinking about to give patients hope back into their life. So it was not
Yeah.
this is not a treatment podcast or a science
Yeah. No,
podcast,
no, it's
but
kind of tied
it's all right. I'll
in.
tie it in. But
Thank you.
it's those are the type of things we think about um, while we're working with a patient. These are types of things at that level that I think about cerebrally to talk about on these podcasts and have the guests and what the message I want to portray in the world. All of that brings hope. It brings light when people aren't in pain, when people are functioning better, when people are healthier. It's contagious. When I'm around, when you're anybody that's around someone that's healthy, energetic, good attitude, um, they always feel better. It's like I've been to places where everyone's like, you're like, man, this is just everyone has them. They have the group of friends or family that they're like, oh man, and they're just like they walk out, they're like, I want to go to bed, like because the whole time they were just complaining about XYZ. And then you have the friends of the family that are always positive and they're always uplifting, and they encourage each other, they laugh together, they spend all those things, and you're like, oh, I want to do that, I want to do that more, I want to hang out with them more. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it goes all the way through there. So a little bit of tangent
Yeah.
at the end, but again, I want to just emphasize that all the details that we put together, all the details that we think about is to encourage more hope and give the hope back to the patient as what we
Yeah.
do as
Absolutely.
we do.
Yeah.
And even more hope to anybody listening to this podcast. So thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time today, Carl.
Thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, thank you for being on. And until next time, we'll bring in another episode of the Believe the Hope podcast. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Believe the Hope podcast. We hope you would love to share the message of hope with others and help spread the message of hope in your communities as well as around the world. The easiest way to do that is to leave a 5-star review. If this episode or any of the episodes of this podcast have brought you any value, hope, inspiration, or more positivity to your life. So whatever device you're listening on, please leave a 5-star review and help spread the message of hope. And until next time, we'll bring you another episode of the Believe in the Hope podcast.